Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Anastasia. Welcome to the Mindfulness podcast dedicated to exploring emotional and mental well-being. We dive into topics like emotional boundaries, psychology, and mindfulness. Thanks for stopping by today. I would like to review a book which is called How to Do the Work, Recognize Your Patterns, Heal from Your Past, and Create Yourself by Dr. Nicole LePera, the holistic psychologist. I am slightly embarrassed to say that it took me over a year to finish this book, partially because I like starting several projects at the same time, and I've been reading a couple of books at the same time, and unfortunately this one was kind of like left for last. At the same time, maybe not unfortunate because I tried to make some notes and highlight some things in the book, so I guess I was just spending a lot more time for this book than I anticipated in the beginning. But it's basically a little practice book. That's what I see it. And the emphasis is in this book is that you are your own best healer. And obviously, depending on what background you come from and what's your current situation, what's your mental health like, if you have any internal struggles, some part of it can be sorted out and healed internally if you start looking into yourself and apply certain practices. And obviously this is not a medical advice, so in any shape or form, please don't take it as the only thing to go for. And if you need more in-depth work on certain areas of your life, there are certainly so many professionals in any area. I'm not one of them. However, I still find very interesting sharing the opinion, and also, I guess, when you talk through certain knowledge that you just obtained, it kind of helped to also sink in a little bit. And hopefully this might be useful for anyone, and then you guys can decide if you want to read this book or not. I myself am fascinated about the whole topic of trauma simply because it's incredible how our past, whatever happened years and years ago, whatever happened when you were just a newborn or a toddler, can have such a major, massive impact on your life in 20, 30, 50, whatever years. This book in particular notices and mentions the work of Dr. Gabor Mate, which I love, and I've been to his lections. The whole topic of imprints of emotional stress that is left in the structure of a brain, causing so many psychological and physiological illnesses in the future, is just very fascinating. And if you are as interested as in this topic as I am, I highly recommend to also study his work. The book How to Do the Work is talking a lot about holistic psychology and describes the basics of this type of psychology. Healing is a daily event. You cannot go somewhere to be healed. You have to go inward to be healed. And you are responsible for your own healing, and you have to be an active participant in this process. You have to, as much as so many things in our life are out of our control, you need to have this power of choice, because this choice enables healing. I hope it makes sense. It does make sense to me, but if you kind of stick in that victim area of the life, when you're like, oh my God, life happens to me, this happened to me, and that's it, that determines who you are, it's really hard to get to the healing stage. Another point which I did like, and obviously we spoke about that a few times already on this podcast, is that the main function of your subconscious mind is to keep you safe. And it's threatened by change. So a lot of us, maybe even most of us, experience this pull towards the familiar in different discomforts. And we often feel that the change is threatening us. So therefore, it's really hard to make certain decisions and changes in your life. This book in particular is talking about also abusive relationships and how people keep coming back to abusive relationships for that specific reason. Because even though the relationships are abusive mentally or physically, it's something comfortable. It's something that you used to. Therefore, your brain seizes at this is safer than changing everything and going to something completely unknown. There is also something empowering about taking responsibility for mental wellness, although it can be obviously scary. And sometimes this is the reason why we self-sabotage ourselves on the way to that self-healing. And the way to do the work and to apply changes is to make small steps. The smaller and most sustainable, the better. One thing I really like about this book is it has plenty of practical exercises. So there's plenty of options to do some sort of self-journaling, to do self-check. Let's say one of the first exercises will be you need to see if you're stuck in some sort of pattern or some sort of thinking, or just stuck in life. If you feel stuck, there are a couple of questions, for example, like do you feel like you're falling back to the old habits whenever you want to try to apply some sort of change? Do you often feel like you're feeling overwhelmed or unable to cope with stress or or maybe even all of your feelings? So here where it begins, you just do this little self-check and little self-journaling. You start building up the future of your progress. The next section of the book is about the conscious self and about becoming aware. It defines the difference between the conscious self and the subconscious self, and also gives you this differentiation between you as yourself and your own thoughts, basically telling you that you are not your thoughts. It's also discussing the power of belief, which again is one of the topics that I find super interesting, because everyone, wherever you're listening to this podcast from, we all come from different backgrounds, from different cultures, and every culture have their own belief system. Maybe even every family can have their own belief system. So obviously each of us can grow up in the same kind of society, in the same city, in the same town, village, and every single family, every single person can have a different belief system, which will then might determine your actions and reactions in the future, the choices you make, the people you meet. But again, none of those beliefs make you you. And you always can turn around, look at those beliefs and say, these don't work for me anymore. And they don't identify me. So depending on what those beliefs are, and if they don't serve you, you can always just separate yourself from them and start building this strong consciousness. Again, there are a couple of exercises. This is what kind of reflects from the name of the book. You're doing the work. The book, the author gives you plenty of information, different strategies, different techniques, and then you have to sit down, spend time with yourself, get within your own emotions and your mind, and actually do the work. I feel like maybe this is why this book took so long to read, because every section, it wasn't just like, oh yeah, I finished reading, moving on. It was kind of like, okay, I read this section, let's try to do some practices. Let's try to do some journaling. Let's try to do the work on this section and that section. And this is brilliant. The next pretty big section is all about trauma, which in a way I feel like social media doesn't really make sound good, because it seems like everyone's traumatized and the trauma's everywhere and people are talking about it sometimes in a little bit of a undermining and silly way, I want to say. I specifically like the section which is talking about the archetypes of childhood trauma. There are a few of them, and I'm not going to get into details because I don't want to spoiler the book too much, but I'm going to name them for you. Having a parent who denies your reality, having a parent who does not see or hear you, having a parent who lives through you or molds and shapes you. I'm going to actually stop on this one because this one reminded me of my mom in a way. And I'm going to read a couple of lines that I highlighted. I think that it's quite interesting. Parent figures who live out of their lives through their children carry a deep-seated painful belief that they are a failure or in some way inadequate, and often project their core belief into their children. Not directly what my mom used to do. However, I remember I was always pushed to be more, better, you know. There were a couple of kind of like sentences here and there. Oh, I haven't done this, therefore you should be better than me. Or I haven't achieved that, therefore I'm working here, my job's here to make you do that. Which back then I was protesting against, and it wasn't an active protest and like, oh my God, no. It was kind of like subconscious. It was like, oh, it doesn't feel right. And I remember when my son was born and I started having these little, oh yeah, it would be good if he would be this and he would be that. And this is what I caught myself. I was like, this is not okay. I don't think this is normal. I don't think any parent should be saying, oh, I see my son being Elon Musk or whatever, or a famous actor or an astronaut. Like, they shape themselves and they decide what they want to be. Our job as a parent is support them, guide them, and help them to get where they want to be. So back to the book. The next line is, the result is that the child may feel an oppressive amount of pressure to succeed. There you go. Hello, I'm raising my hand up. This is me. And abandons parts of their authentic self in order to please the parent figure. So this is, I find it incredibly relevant because I'm 33 and I still feel lost in some areas of my life, because up till now, I want to say maybe now, up to a few years back, I feel like majority of my life I was doing something to kind of like fit in and impress and make it's not even make my parents like love me or something, but like a parent figure inside me or something like that. It's just kind of like I had to overachieve and everything. And now when sometimes I feel like, I like my job, I'm good at what I'm doing, but it doesn't give me this incredible internal satisfaction of, oh my goodness, I'm doing something which is mine and good. I feel absolutely lost, because maybe I am doing something that I'm meant to do, and this is great. But internally, there's still a little bit of me which is like, damn it, I'm not really sure, because it doesn't feel like I've achieved. There's no like this high level of contempt of, okay, peace with it. I'm in peace with what I'm doing. I'm in constant search, and it doesn't feel really comfortable, to be fair. The next archetype is having a parent who does not model boundaries. Also, again, applicable to me, I think. For example, a common boundary crossing occurs when one parent figure complains to child about the other parent figure. That happened in my childhood, left, right, and sideways. The parent figure unable to appreciate that the child is not a peer and maybe seeking emotional support from their child. That also happened quite a lot. And back then, I didn't think anything of it. But the more I read and research about it now, the more I'm like, well, actually, it does make sense, because parent is supposed to be the parent figure. So we cannot seek support or protection from a child. It confuses them. They just get like, they have to grow up at the age when they're not supposed to be that grown up. The next archetype is the having a parent who's overly focused on appearance. And hello. And again, yes, this is me. This begins a lifelong practice of believing that receiving love is conditional on one's outward appearance. Yes, again, 33. And I still think that, if I'm going to gain extra kilogram, or if I'm going to look somehow different, if I am not going to take care of myself in a certain way, people just will not like me, won't be friends with me, so on and so forth. The next archetype is having a parent who cannot regulate their emotion. As we know, emotional regulation is the process of experiencing an emotion, allowing the sensation to pass through the body, and identifying those emotions and breathing through it until it eventually passes. I said that a couple of times before on this podcast, and I am going to keep saying that over and over again, but I wish we'd rather learned emotional intelligence in school than some of the other topics that we did, because I find it's a lot harder learning it and applying it to your life in your 30s, rather than doing that when you're a child. And obviously, when you have a parent figure who cannot regulate their emotions, even if that doesn't lead to mental or emotional or physical abuse, it's still very confusing. And, an example of that can be, let's say, a silent treatment or a very loud screaming or name calling. And none of that is good. Now, when I was reading this book the first time, I thought, you know what, it's very easy to fall into this, reading this book, it's very easy to fall into this thinking of, oh, that's it. So the parents are, it's their fault. They're fucked me up and now I'm this. But this is a really good point of not falling into the victimizing. Your parents has done as much as they could. So has my parents done as much as they could. The best abilities to they believed they could have done where you were a child. What you have now is the consequences of those choices and decisions back then, but there's nothing to guilt trip. There's nothing to judge. It's just, let's say, I don't know, the fence broke. You moved in the house and you lived there for 30 years and then the fence broke down. You're not going to chase the person who built the fence 30 years ago and go, you bastard. How dare you? Look at your work. Now it's all broken and I'm going to have to fix it. No, you just suck it up. You go and fix the fence. You find another person who can fix it or you do it yourself. And this is the same kind of mentality that applies here. I find that it's really easy to start being like, oh, there you go. So I had this and this and that. So, and this is why I have this whatever, complications or just struggles at this point. No, don't do that. Just kind of accept the facts. Okay, they came from here and there. Fine. And that's going to help you to find the solution to it. And basically all these archetypes of parenting bring us to the maladaptive coping strategies, which is people-pleasing, anger or rage, and dissociation. Let's say in my case, I've noticed people-pleasing a lot and dissociation. I'm not very angry or person who can experience or express any kind of rage, but other two definitely. And again, this book gives you then an exercises to identify your childhood wounds. You basically, again, write down, depending on whichever archetype of parent you think you had when you were a child. And this is about the identification and accepting of what you're dealing with. And maybe, at least that's happened in my case as well, you're going to find some sort of reactions that you do and have even now, whatever old you are. So this is what you reacted and what you had when you were a kid. And then while you write all these things down, you might think, oh my God, I'm still doing these things. It's so automatic. It's just really good for this self-consciousness. Next section of the book is talking about the trauma of the body. We discussed it before again in several episodes, and there's plenty of information and books out there. So this one is kind of like a very nice add-on to those. The author is talking about fight or flight response and the whole immobilization of the body when the stress comes in the picture. She's talking about co-regulation. So let's say if you lived in a quite chaotic house where overreaction, anger, disengagement of fear were the norm, your internal resources were likely tied up in the management of stress. So you were in a constant survival mode. That's like one of the examples. And it touches upon emotional addiction, when basically our mind and body becomes reliant on the strong physical response that comes from the release of the neurotransmitters associated with that experience and solidify it in the neural pathways in our brain. So the brain essentially learns to crave feelings associated with a trauma response. This is the loop of emotional addiction. How interesting is this? Let's talk about Netflix and binge watching. The stressful crime show allows you to feel the same emotional spikes that you felt all day. You love the uncertainty and the way it leaves you on the edge of your seat. Our body learns to engage in patterns like these to feel like a familiar self. Our body responds to those feelings by releasing hormones such as cortisol and neurochemicals such as dopamine, and fundamentally change our cellular chemistry. We now need to seek out the same kind of emotional hit again and again. It kind of ruined the whole experience of watching true crime for me because I love it. And when I read this, I was like, oh, great. Okay, this is amazing. So I always thought I'm just listening for it or, watching it because I'm fascinated about the story of people and why they become who they become. But I think there's more to it. And now whenever I want to put a show like that on, sometimes I hesitate. Obviously, I'm still listening to those, but sometimes I actually kind of step back a little bit and just try to think, what am I doing this for? Sometimes it's curiosity. For example, Mr. Bolin released 3 new episodes that I missed, and I'm curious what the stories are about. And sometimes I feel like it's exactly the loop. And if there's any other niche, let's say, of the content on Netflix out there, I feel like I'm bored watching it because it doesn't give me the same hit. It's very interesting noticing these things. One of the exercises from the book that I really enjoyed was accessing your nervous system dysregulation. Step 1 is to witness yourself. Possible psychological and emotional symptoms. Let's say you look for activation symptoms like guilt, mood swings, fear, self-blame, anxiety, rage, panic, confusion. And you're looking for the shutdown symptoms, for example, inability to think clearly or inability to connect with people. You're looking for some physical symptoms like teeth grinding, exhaustion, picking your nails, and possible social symptoms such as attachment symptoms like push or pull, avoidant relationship patterns, fear of abandonment, and emotional symptoms like social anxiety or social withdrawal. Next step would be to restore the balance to your nervous system. This is basically, again, we spoke about that in a couple of podcasts before. One of those, for example, could be find your ground in present moments. So find a smell, a taste, a sound in your current moment and kind of anchor yourself in there. It can be meditation. It can be visualization meditation, whatever works for you. It can be the practice of being more conscious about your consumption of information. I actually want to do another episode on that because I feel like as much as there's so much interesting out there and so much useful information out there, there's obviously as well overconsumption and just flooding of information, and that also can be really confusing and exhausting. And you should be mindful of how you feel in your body as you consume whatever kind of information that is. And last but not least, every day, what I'm doing every day is find nature and witness it. For example, if I go outside to walk my dog, in the morning, I never take my phone with me. It can be a walk of 20 minutes. It can be an hour walk. I do not take my phone with me. I enjoy listening to the birds, peacocks, watching the airplanes fly, looking at the cows and the horses, and just kind of like witnessing the morning happening. I do sometimes take my phone for the evening walks for various reasons, but I consciously really try not to touch it and not to just use it at all. This is like one of the things, let's say, I applied in my life to make a change and find and witness the nature. And there is a little writing, let's say, exercise to do this self-journaling. So you can say, today I'm practicing this and I'm grateful for that. And changes this area allows me, let's say, to feel peace, to feel more happy, to feel calmer, to feel more relaxed. And today, let's say, I'm practicing when I find safety in the present moment, or you do visualization meditation, or you go for a walk, let's say. The next section of the book is talking about mind-body healing practices, and specifically describes the habits and behaviors that we've learned and responses that we have from them, that your body is using to keep you alive, essentially. So it's a survival mechanism. But as much as your body have learned that, you can teach it and make it learn healthy routes to recovering. It's talking about neuroplasticity, something we discussed again before, and that your genes are not fixed. And basically, this is what this book is for, to do the work to make a change happen. And the more you get tuned with your body, sometimes your body will tell you what to do. For instance, some days I just start singing. Whatever I feel, I just want to sing. Some days I just realize, while I'm cooking, I'm just kind of like dancing. There's even no music. I have music in my head and my body's like grooving, So your body will kind of like give you a hint. We need to release. And there are different ways for people to release. I spoke about it before, and I used the example of running. A couple of years ago, I hated running all my life. I absolutely hated it. It was the worst thing for me to do. I never enjoyed it, never understood why on earth people are doing that. And a couple of years ago, I had quite a difficult time in my mental state. And I just went for a walk with my dog. And I just felt like, you know what, I want to run. And I went for a run. And whole summer, it was quite mentally difficult summer. I ran like crazy. And I actually fully enjoyed it. And sometimes even if I felt like, oh God, I cannot, like this is the worst thing I could do now is go for a run. And I kind of still push myself a little bit. I felt absolutely amazing after. Another thing I want to mention, which I found interesting, is the top-down process, which is basically brain-to-body conversation process. So one of the examples of that is meditation, when you take your brain, essentially, and you make it scan through whole your body and see where do you feel the tension, where do you feel uncomfort, when and where you can feel maybe pain. And this can also be a really good healing aspect of restoring that balance in your mind and body. Healing the gut is another interesting one. Basically, the book refers to the chronic and overwhelming stress that some of us may be experiencing in a childhood, and how it has impact on ability of the body to rest and digest properly in the future. We have around 500 million neurons in our gut, which can basically, let's call it, talk directly to the brain via the pathway known as the gut-brain axis. The gut is also home to an extensive network of nerve cells along the gut wall that basically make up what's known as the enteric nervous system. And this system of nervous cells is so complex that researchers often refer to it as a second brain. 90%, that's a huge number, 90% of neurotransmitter serotonin, commonly referred as the happy hormone, is made in our gut. In a trauma state, physical dysregulation in both nervous system and the guts impairs our digestion. So the body is actually working against our ability to properly absorb nutrition from our food. And there's some theorizing around some studies that suggest that all this dysregulation in the guts could be a possible root cause for some conditions, such as autism, anxiety, ADHD, depression. But I don't know much about that, so I'm not going to dive into it. And there are obviously some tips on healing your gut. Nothing like a diet as such, but just kind of basic understanding of how the gut works and what can support your gut. Another very important thing is healing your sleep and healing with breath. So we know that inadequate sleep is increasingly damaging, especially to a growing body. And I think everyone knows now that when we sleep, our body repairs itself. So sleep is very important. Please do not sacrifice your sleep. And the whole breath situation is about learning how to breathe. You're more than welcome to listen to the episode about the breathing in this podcast, where we discuss different techniques and basically how to learn how to breathe. It sounds stupid when I say it, because how can you learn how to breathe? I'm doing it right now. It's so automatic, but breathing techniques can actually really help you to calm down, slow down your heart rate, and just rebalance yourself. Healing with movement and healing with play. Well, with movement, I won't stop there too much, because I feel like everyone understands that movement is essential. It's really important to do any kind of movement: walking, running, yoga, Pilates, gym, athletics, swimming, whatever it can be, whatever can make you happy. Interestingly, healing with play is something that I'm learning now for 4 years now, since I've had a kid, because I kind of forgot how to be playful, and the pure enjoyment of doing wasn't really accessible to me anymore. Especially growing up in a family, in an environment where the result goal was more important than the process. My husband is really good at this. He always tells me, no, enjoy the process. And I got really angry a few times with him, because I don't understand it. I don't get it. And I think it was so frustrating to me that it made me angry. I could not understand, what does that mean? How can you enjoy the process? You need to get to the result, what matters. And I think having a child kind of unlocked another part of me where play is actually so much fun. There is a big section about the power of belief and how certain beliefs in our life can act as protective mechanisms. There is some information on the origin of belief. So the more we practice certain thoughts, the more our brain wires itself to default to these thought patterns. And when the certain belief is repeatedly validated, it can become a core belief, which is basically a deepest perception about our identity. Interestingly, which still doesn't make you who you are, doesn't actually, in fact, identify you. And as in chapter 2, the book is talking about, we are not our thoughts, and we are also not our core beliefs. So it's kind of very useful from time to time to review those as well. The book talks quite a lot about how the significant imprinting, actually where it comes from. And it comes from people we are most bonded to, our parent figures. There was a study that found when adults and babies look into each other's eyes, their brain waves actually sync, creating some sort of joint networked state that connects the two people in a silent language of communication. And the state of the most beneficial mode for brain development in childhood is a state of peace where we feel safe and secure to play. And also this section is talking about how the children's brain develop. And super important, when children's important needs are not adequately and consistently met, they often develop a subconscious core belief that they are not worthy of having these needs met. And often these small, consistent messages just become internalized and essentially become our core beliefs for the rest of our lives. And very cool part of this book is when you write down your core beliefs, kind of like inventorizing it a little bit. Core beliefs about yourself, about others, about your past, about your present, about your future. And you are creating a new belief. Very good exercise. You're creating your new core beliefs. Obviously, it also creates work. You can just write it down once and be like, yeah, done. So it will require some work in the future as well. And this is where the book then goes to chapter 7, which is called Meet Your Inner Child. Personally, I think it's a crucial topic in understanding yourself in any way, shape, and form. The book suggests 7 inner child archetypes. The caretaker. gains sense of identity and self-worth through neglecting their own needs. The overachiever feels seen, heard, and valued through success and achievement. The underachiever keeps themselves small, unseen, and beneath their potential due to fear of criticism or shame about failure. The rescuer or protector attempts to rescue those around in attempt to heal them from their own vulnerability. The life of the party, always happy, always cheerful, comedic person who never shows pain, weakness, or any vulnerability. The yes person drops everything and neglects all needs in the service of others. The hero worshipper needs to have a person or guru to follow. Now, don't know about you, I kind of found myself in each of those in different periods of my life. The whole section discusses all these archetypes, and the exercise in the end of it is very cool because you write yourself a letter, but not yourself as such. You're writing every archetype of inner child a letter. And basically you just say, I know you're doing this, and you're doing this because of whatever happened to make yourself happy or proud or loved or whatever. And then you kind of take this position as like a parent figure in a way. And you just talk to this inner child saying, I see you, I hear you, and I love you always. Wise, adult, me. Put your name in there. There is also a section that is talking about your ego consciousness, the concept of self-truth, when you are identifying and meeting your ego and basically, even understanding what ego is. I feel like this book in some ways kind of going through the episodes that I've done before. In chapter 10, this book is talking about boundaries, which is the basics. And the lack of boundaries in childhood often manifests itself as a similar difficulty setting boundaries in adulthood. It's just the foundation. This is all I can say. It gives you more information on physical boundaries, resource boundaries, mental, emotional boundaries, examples, and everything. It talks about emotional dumping and oversharing when it comes to boundaries as well, and gives you the tips on how to set boundaries. It's brilliant. There's even some examples here. So someone's inviting you somewhere to help them out, and you don't know what to say. Just look in the book, and it gives you, I wish I could, but now it isn't good time. That's it. That's all I have to say. You don't even have to come up with anything else. Just get the phrases from the book. Super useful. Also, it talks about the expectation and comparison and kind of how to work through that a little bit. And obviously, end of the chapter comes with the exercise on how to create a new boundary, which is huge. So please take your time and do the work. The next episode is about reparenting. So Dr. Steve Taylor, psychologist, studies the phenomenon that he calls awakening. You can call them flashbacks of insight, realizations, or whatever else you like. So they open us to the reality that we are more than simple creations of flesh, that we have soul or spirit, that we desire connection or to something great than our individual selves. And they show us who we think we are. It's not necessarily who we are. How cool is this? Hey? And I feel like everyone's going through some of crisis of self at some point of their life. Some people might find the phrase, I have no idea what I want, I have no idea who you are, familiar. And the whole idea of reparenting is to see yourself and love yourself for who you are. Give yourself what you weren't able to get from the others before. All of us, absolutely every single person, deeply desired to be seen, heard, and authentically expressed, to simply just be us. Most of parent figures didn't learn how to meet their own needs, let alone another person's needs. When we reparent, we begin by learning how to identify our physical, emotional, and maybe spiritual needs. And then we practice noticing the conditioned way we've gone about attempting to get those needs met. Essentially, your wise inner parent cultivates acceptance while honoring the needs of your inner child. And you become the priority. You become seen, heard, and values for the authentic parts of yourself. And to develop this wise inner parent, you will need to learn how to trust yourself. And that might take time. You need to obtain new habits. For example, speaking kindly to yourself, asking yourself a question, what can I do for myself at this moment? I feel like having a child helps with this as well, because when your kid, a simple example, when your kid is ill, you're not going to send them to nursery. You're not going to send them to school. You're not going to make them walk or exercise. You're just going to say, lay down, have a warm drink, and relax. Have a sleep. I want you to get better. But often, when it comes to us, because we're adults, we start kicking ass. No, get up, you're lazy ass. This is not an excuse to not achieve, especially with this era of social media, when everyone's overachieving, when everyone's a coach and everyone's suggesting you this and that. Everyone's successful. Successful people don't sleep much. They wake up at 4 a.m. and start meditating and then going to the gym for 5 hours a day. They don't eat carbs. They don't eat sugar, this and that, right? And then you don't have an excuse. You think like you have to go and smash it. And being ill is not an excuse for that. But no, the right thing would be, if you're really not feeling well, to just do the same as you do for your child. Just lie down and take some time off. The first pillar of reparenting is emotional regulation, to successfully navigate our emotional states. The second pillar is loving discipline. Discipline is an important part of the healing process, and cultivating it helps to show up for ourselves. We are worth showing up for. This is what it's about. And it's super important to understand that this act of daily discipline should be a loving one. Military-style discipline, which leaves room for no flexibility and the inevitable mistake, can result in destructive patterns that do not express the true wants and needs of our authentic selves. Trust me, the world doesn't end and will not fall apart if we take a day to rest. The third pillar goes hand in hand with discipline just mentioned, is self-care. True self-care is supporting your needs and valuing your worth. Self-care is the act of learning to identify and care for your psychological and emotional wants and needs, and especially those that were denied in your childhood. And the fourth pillar is to rediscover our childlike sense of wonder. Again, it goes back to the play. A life lived without play contributes to the development of depression, chronic stress-related illnesses, and even criminal behavior, the book says. As adults, it's crucial for us to prioritize the things in our lives that brings our joy to themselves, not because of any secondary gain, like money, fame, success, adoration. No, but something that could help us re-engage our sense of childlike wonder. Be impulsive. You know, this follow the passion goes everywhere, but a lot of times we start following the passion to become something, to achieve something. It's not about that. And reparenting is a practice. It's highly individualistic work and requires to constantly identify your evolving needs and coping strategies. And eventually, you'll get to the emotional maturity. Unfortunately, emotional immaturity is far more common and revolves around the inability to tolerate. Emotionally immature people are so uncomfortable with their emotions that they typically lash out and become defensive or completely shut down whenever they experience one. Those of ones raised in homes where free self-expression was not supported could find ourselves overly focused in what other can think and feel about us. This is where the daily obsession with views and likes come from. It's It comes from being driven largely by our unmet need to be seen and heard. So this also can make you scared of doing something silly, like dancing to your favorite song in public, or singing in front of people, or performing, or doing the talk. And one of the major achievements of emotional maturity is learning how to be at peace with these misunderstandings, or with being misunderstood, with, oh yeah, someone didn't like what I've done. No matter what fallout may be, when your opinion, belief, and realities, they're still valid. Not in relation to anyone else, but just because you have them. So if you like something, you still should do it, no matter if others like it or not. And it's crazy hard. Emotional maturity allows us to accept all of our emotions, even the horrible ones that we don't want to admit we have. So there is a essentially 90-second rule of emotions. When you replay distressing thoughts, you activate your nervous system response as if you're experiencing the distressing event over and over, and the body cannot really tell the difference in between the thoughts and the actual action. 90-second rule explains that when an emotional reaction is triggered in the brain, it takes approximately 90 seconds for the brain to process and release the emotion. 90-second chemical process occurs in our bodies. It's just something that happens, you cannot control it. And after this time, any remaining emotional response is a choice to stay in that emotional cycle or break it and change your reaction. Obviously, there's some homework to do. There is do the work, develop emotional maturity and resilience homework, and there is emotional body checking as well. I swear I've done every single one. They're all amazing. And the last chapter, Interdependence, basically is telling us that you're never done with your development of emotional maturity. This is great news, isn't it? I'm only joking. It's all good. This chapter is talking about importance of finding the self-healer community. We are all communal creatures. We need someone around us, and the power of community is very strong. Admitting that we feel alone does make us vulnerable and can expose some of core deficiency of I'm unloved because I'm unlovable, or I'm alone because of whatever reason. And finding authentic friendship, finding authentic relationships can also be one thing that can really help you with self-healing. And when we feel safe and secure, we feel comfortable enough to express our internal state, even if it's dysregulated or negative, knowing that we can return to baseline with the help of our community, or with the help of the person that can understand us, that loves us for just who we are. This book is amazing. I hope I didn't spoil too much, but I feel like I got into depth in pretty much every chapter. If you are interested in learning more about yourself, in maybe not particularly changing something, but just exploring, I feel like this book is amazing. But you have to be open-minded, as with any book in psychology and in this kind of niche. Yeah, this was it. I hope you really enjoyed it. I love this, and it was actually really good coming back to this book because I finished reading it a couple of months ago and I just couldn't get any time on my hands to do the review any earlier. But it was amazing to get back to all those homeworks that I've done and actually see how by doing that work, the changes that occurred are more visible now. Thank you for joining for this session, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye.